Welcome to Next to Madison, a podcast to help you live your best life.
Welcome back to another episode of Next to Madison. On today's episode, we are talking with a psychic, spiritual tarot reader coach. She is unbelievable. I had a reading with her. She gave me so much amazing advice. Sometimes in life, we just need help accessing our guides so we can make sure that we are on the right path and that we are going to have success and that we're not making more tough mistakes that we might not need to make. So I was blown away by her. So I'm like, you've got to come on the podcast. So we talk about how to tap into guides, how to ask your guides for help, her spiritual community, how she got started in this, all this good stuff. You are not going to want to miss it. We all have guardian angels and spirit guides, and how you can utilize them to benefit you is all unfolded in this episode. So we will be right back after this brief message with our guest on Next to Madison.
Hey, it's Madison Malloy. I just wanted to remind you to make sure you grab a copy of my book, Time to Lighten the Fuck Up. It is a great, funny self-help book that is going to help you get out of your own way. I have already helped thousands and thousands of people, and they are on their way to living their dream life, and I want every listener to be able to live their dream life as well. So grab a copy of the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or even the audiobook on Audible. Now back to the show.
We are back with our guest on this episode of Next to Madison. Are we ready to dive into it? Let's do it. All right, we've got our guest, Ari Hunniford. How are you?
I'm good. I'm just going to correct you right off the top that it's Ari Hunniford.
Ari Hunniford. I thought you were from the character from the Entourage.
I'm telling you what, my parents spelled it like Ari, so I've been dealing with that my entire life. But I like to correct people at the beginning because if not, it just gets uncomfortable later.
It's like, it's not Ari, it's Ari.
Yeah, but it's spelled Ari, so it's so confusing. I always tell people it's like Mary without the M, or I always do this weird hand gesture where I'm like, Ari, it's like Ari, and throw my hands up in the air.
Okay, I love it. Oh, well, good. So, okay, so let's get into it. Like, you're a spiritual advisor, you're a psychic, you're a tarot card reader, you are a speaker, you are a jack of all trades. So when did you discover you had this gift? I'm always so fascinated by people that have this gift.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'll go out on a limb here and say, I believe everyone has these gifts. I think that everyone has psychic abilities and everyone has channeling abilities. It's just a matter that most people don't tap into them in their lifetime, right? Or they block them, or like in my case, I always was channeling. I always had this information coming to me. I just didn't know it wasn't me. I always joke that I thought that I was just really smart because like in my career that I had before this, I would just know what to say and the answer would just come to me and I'd just be okay. Or if I was talking to someone, I would know how to comfort them or how to help them. And it wasn't until I started down my own spiritual path and started getting readings from other people, other practitioners, that I started getting the same message over and over again that you're supposed to do this, which is a jarring message to get. So that was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. That started happening. And so it's happened crazy fast. And I haven't fought every step of the way, but I did fight for a long time because it just felt too weird. And I was in the corporate world. Like I have a nonprofit consulting firm that was greatly successful. And so to all of a sudden switch gears into this woo-woo, magical, mystical realm, totally different.
That is it. So if you're like out at a party, can you pick up, like if you're just like talking to somebody or you see somebody, can you pick up like advice for them or like their guides coming through to you?
So I tend to try really, really hard to not tap into someone without their permission. I think ethically, especially because I do this for a living, ethically, I could tap into them. No, ethically, I shouldn't tap into them, but I could. So like if I was at a party and I just started telling you what was going on with you, it could totally freak you out, right? And you haven't given me permission. It's so invasive.
Right. Okay.
And to me, it's a huge problem in the spiritual world is that, part of it is shows like with Teresa Caputo, right, where she's shown walking up to people at the grocery store and she's just giving them readings, which just a reminder to everyone, like that's not real, right? There's a whole bunch of coordination going on. There's
totally.
Yeah. And so um I think we have this idea, or people wear this idea that I'm an empath with a badge of honor, which there's nothing wrong with being an empath, but just because you can pick up on somebody's stuff doesn't mean that you necessarily should, in my opinion. And so for me, especially once I started doing it for a living, it was setting up boundaries within myself, of I look, team, spiritual team, I don't want to tap in unless I've said, can I tap into your guides and your angels, which is what I do at the beginning of a reading. Now, that's not to say that if I walk in a room, I can't tell if it's good energy or bad energy. If somebody has really like a black cloud over them, and that I'm going to pick up on, but I'm not going to go into why they have that black cloud unless I have permission from them to do that. And honestly, I don't want to. I don't want to do this
Yeah.
24 hours a day. It would be really exhausting. So I do like the boundaries I've set up within my own spiritual team, with that. And unless there is something very specific that needs to get done, they tend to respect that. I don't tap into people unless there's a whole reason to do it, and unless they've told me it's okay.
So when you talk about tapping in, I get the permission
Yeah.
and you tap into their guides. What
Yeah.
can you explain to us that process of how it
I can
goes?
try. Yeah, for me, and this is going to be individual for every single psychic or intuitive or empath or whatever they want to call themselves. It's going to be kind of an individual thing. But for me, the second I ask that question and they say yes, it's almost like my spirit team, which I would call my guides, my spirit guides, my angels, sometimes my ancestors, some loved ones who have passed away kind of stick around with me. It's almost like they form a bond with whoever's guides that I'm talking to, right? And so I don't tend to see them as individual beings or entities. It's kind of a collective for most people at first. Now, sometimes people's question will be, oh, can I meet my guides? And then we'll see if we can get some clarity on who's who and what's going on. But overall, they kind of speak as a whole to me. And so it's more of an energetic thing. My strongest gift is claircognizance, which is clear knowing. It's one that I think a lot of people have, which is part of that. I just thought I was smart because I just knew things that I had no business knowing. Um,
Wow.
once I started realizing that that was a gift for me instead of me being clever, then I could start feeling energetically what was happening. So the second I tap into somebody else's team, the entire energy shifts. There's an understanding of what's going on with them. Oftentimes they'll show me with a physical sensation in my body, which is more clairsentience, which is clair feeling. So like if I tapped into you and you were having a bad day, I would probably go, ooh, okay, I can feel some heaviness. I can feel, so something's going on here. Do you want to tap into that more and see what we want to get information or how to get out of that? Or if someone's really happy and excited for their first reading or to work with me, sometimes their guides are just like fluttery. And it's so fun to tap into that energy because the excitement in the whole space just goes
Yeah.
up.
Oh
Yeah,
my
it's super
God.
fun.
So
Yeah.
everybody has these guides. Do we all have the same amount?
No, not in my opinion. And I'm going to say in
Okay.
my opinion a lot. And the reason why is because I am a big fan of spirituality being a personal thing. I am not a fan of people shoulding one another. And just like in any organized religion, we see that in spirituality, where someone will come on Instagram or come out and say, you should believe this and this is the truth. And I'm not a big believer in the truth as a whole. I feel
Yeah.
like there's so many different ways to be spiritual. There's a million paths to the divine, is the saying out there.
Right.
And so what is working for me and what I experience or what I believe may be totally different to someone else. And I'm not going to say I'm right versus them. Now, for me, I believe that everyone has guides with them, spirit guides. I believe there's a different number for everyone. A lot of people will only have kind of a few that are in with them all the time. For instance, for me, I usually have 3 that are hanging out with me. Again, they speak to me most of the time as a collective. I don't get individual messages often from them. And I've actually had one that was with me for a long time and who's tapped out now. He's somewhere else. And now I have a
Wow.
stepped in, because sometimes they can step in and help us with a specific thing in our life, right? And I believe, I say he, and they don't really have a gender. They don't have, like, oftentimes we're like, what's their name? And they very often laugh about that, because a lot of them, like, names don't mean the same thing to them. So sometimes they'll give you a silly name, or they'll say, I'm George, right? And it's like, okay. But names are,
Do you hear their voices talking?
I don't. I feel them more energetically. So, like, for me, again, it's just that knowing first and foremost. So when I'm getting a message, it sounds almost like my own voice, which is why it's so confusing for so many people. But if I tap into them individually, or if I meditate and go to meet them, quote unquote, meet them somewhere, like if I imagine myself in an empty room and I call them in one at a time, they have a totally different energetic feel to each of them. And then there's kind of like a whole energy when they're all together and they're all helping me with connecting to somebody else. So, like, if I tapped into you, your whole
Fascinating.
team, it's crazy.
You're allowed to tap into me on this podcast. I'm giving you
Okay,
permission.
perfect.
In case I
Perfect.
ask you questions, we'll have fun with
Beautiful.
this.
I appreciate that. So if I tapped into you and your energy, like, your guides all kind of feel together, right? Like, I can feel them. It's almost like a,
So you can feel them now, my
yeah,
guides.
absolutely. Like, you say
Interesting.
tap into them and I'm like, great, there they are. So for you, like, it feels like, and I'm gonna go out on a limb here. What I am feeling for you is 3. And so I feel those around you, but it's not just them. There's like a layer of them. And then there's also like angels that kind of watch over you, who step in at specific reasons. And then those ancestors, like for you, if the way ancestors show up for me, they kind of come up to the back, and it's almost like a protective ring around so many people. So for you, you've got people, and strong, like fiery feminine
Perfect.
people behind you. Yeah, absolutely. It's part of where you can like draw in that strength, right? Is like they're watching, and feels for sure like they show up for sure when you step on stage, where they're like, I got you. So that
That's amazing.
rush of energy that you might feel when you step on stage, yeah, part of that's nerves, part of that's excitement, part of that's there, but it's also your team is like, let's do it. So they can just help you and hold you steady while you're doing these things. And I think the biggest thing to remember is you can ask. You can say, hey, I'm going to go out on stage here and I'm nervous. Please help
Right.
me.
Oh my
And
gosh. I didn't think,
you can,
wow, what a great piece of
absolutely.
advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, here's what I'll say. A lot of people will say if you ask for help and then you take it back, it's hard for them to help you, especially with our angels. So take it back means, like, if I wanted to get some guidance on a next step in a career, and I said, okay, I'm so confused. Angels, please help me. Please help me figure out what the next step is. And then the next thing I do is call my best friend and say, I need you to help me figure out what the next step is. Or I sit down and I start trying to hash it out because I'm going to try to figure it out. It's like I gave them the question, and before I gave them a chance to help me, I immediately took it back and tried to figure it out on my own. So
I think
sometimes,
most people by default do that.
absolutely, which is one of the challenges. I make these silly videos on Instagram, and in those silly videos, that's one of the jokes that I make regularly, is that I'll be sitting here at my desk and I'll go, okay, I need help. And the angel gets so excited because they're ready to help me. And then I'm like, hold on a second. No, let me ask this, or let me do this. And I think that's something that happens a lot. It's one of the reasons, I have a friend who does angel readings. Her name's Brenda Hardwick, and she's amazing. But one of the things she says is it's why so many miracles happen in crazy moments, because you, in a car accident or in a moment, you go, help me, and you don't have time to take it back. And so there's these crazy things that happen when
Whoa.
people get helped, because they're not immediately trying to figure out how to fix the problem, because they're in the problem. There's nothing they can do. And so that's one of the things she always talks about, is that, like, at that moment you just give it to them and you trust. but we're not brought up to trust. Like that's not what we
No.
do. We are brought up to fix problems and to like smush the square peg into the round hole, instead of allow things to flow in our lives. And believe me, that's one of my biggest things on my journey. Flow.
So it's so interesting because, okay, so because I've never even heard of that. Anyone say
Okay.
that? So that is like fascinating, but I think it's like, let's go back to the job thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're asking, like, guys, please help me figure out the next step.
Yeah.
But then naturally, you think the action would be go to a website, call a friend, figure out who's
Totally.
hiring. That just seems like they're giving you the ideas that are jumped in your head to progress that action. So how do you?
Yes. How do you? That's the question of the hour, right? And again, one of the things I joke about a lot on Instagram is that idea of, okay, how do you know when they are handing you something, right? When they're
Yes.
saying, hey, go do this, and how not. So here's how I do it in my practice. I ask for the things when I go to bed. I give it to God, give it to the universe, give it to my
Yep.
guide, to whoever you want to say at night, because then usually that's going to give them the time to work it out while I'm asleep. And then when I wake up the next morning, often I'll have the, okay, this is what I need to do. Now, what I do for myself to check in is if I'm getting in the way of it, is does this feel divinely led? Like, those moments in your life where it's just right?
Mhm.
Like you just know it. It's right. You're like, oh my gosh, this is that moment. That's what helps me discern when it's me versus them. When it feels hard, when it feels like I am like beating my head against the wall and I can't get anything to fit together and I can't make it happen, that's usually me getting in my own way. So that's when I have to stop and go, okay, it shouldn't be this hard. Life is not supposed to be hard. I really don't believe that it is.
I
Um,
agree with you. We make it hard.
so yeah, absolutely. It's like the Roomba, right? The little motorized vacuum cleaner getting and punching its head against the
Yeah.
wall. Eventually, it's going to turn around and find a different path. We are exactly like that. We are like just butting our heads against the wall until finally it's like, oh, this hurts. I should stop that. And then we change in a different direction. So part of my spiritual path and what I try to help others with in the coaching is noticing when you're beating your head against the wall faster. Because we're all going to
Yeah.
do it, human. But if you do it and you start realizing, oh my gosh, this doesn't feel good before you create the giant bruise on your head, then you can change directions. You can allow that flow to happen in your life. And that really is what has helped me and so many of my clients with, okay, hold on.
Ah,
What's happening here? You're getting kicked in the shin. Move out of the way. Don't let that thing kick you in the shin anymore.
that's so interesting because you bring up if it's hard, it's not from them. If it's hard, it's you in your own way. So when you feel frustrated or like,
Mhm.
what on earth is happening? What is this trying to teach me? Because I've gone through some struggles with just kind
Totally.
of business things and trying to get everything to fit together and timing and like, why is this taking so long? Why is this not worked?
Yeah.
And I keep thinking like, okay, something, it's happening for a reason,
Mhm.
but I just wish I could see it now.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind, I mean, this is a super oversimplified version of this, right? Because there are different things that are coming on to us in our lives. Because I don't want anyone out there beating themselves up because they're having a rough time. Like part of the human experience is we're going to have rough times. Part of the human experience is that we're going to learn these lessons in specific ways. So I do think that sometimes challenges or obstacles can be put in our way as that learning curve, right? As that, okay, I don't want to feel this way anymore. So I need to learn this lesson so that I stop putting myself in situations where I feel this way, right? Or I
Yes.
learn to avoid these situations because sometimes we're not putting ourselves in it, it just comes right at us. And so when we have those things that happen with it, it's then finding out, okay, how can I feel at peace as fast as possible? So I have some medical issues that are going on. it's hard to feel at peace when you have unknowns, when you're dealing with something. And there's a lot of people in the spiritual world that would turn immediately and go, well, you're drawing this to you. Why are you drawing this to you? And let me just say, when I hear that, I want to just poke them right in the eye, because like, even if it's true, which maybe it is
Yeah.
not, that's not what somebody who's going through it in the time needs to hear, right?
Mm-mm.
What is more helpful is that idea of, how can we accept where we are right now? How can we sit in this energy of where we are right now, and also let our path go in a direction where this doesn't feel as bad as it feels right now,
Yeah.
right? How can I let myself walk towards something that's going to feel better? How can I restructure what I am going through and what I'm thinking to feel more comfortable in my own skin? And it's not easy. It's not easy. Sometimes it is going to feel challenging, because we have not been taught in our lives, most of us at least, we've not been taught in our lives to take care of ourselves. We've not been taught to stop and rest. Like, we live in a
To
culture
go,
of,
go, go. Yeah.
yeah, that hustle culture is so toxic.
Well, it's so
And
funny though, because usually, like, when you ask people, and I do it too, and you probably do it because you're
yeah,
human, where they say, how are you? What are you up to? And we just default into, oh, just hustling along, making shit happen, working away, blah, blah,
go, go, go.
blah. Instead of being
Yeah,
like, yeah, you know what? I'm working because I have to, but I'm just enjoying life.
yeah,
Life is good. Like, it's an interesting how we always default to, like, oh, people will think more highly of us if we're slaving away, we're doing this. And I think that's just the way our society is, because we have to survive. We're
totally.
still
Totally.
survival instincts. So
Well,
let's
and we're
go.
taught to have a bunch of jobs. Like, if we're taught to have a bunch of jobs and we have all these things, like, I don't know about you, but I have at least, I don't know, feels like 20 jobs on any given day.
Totally.
So yeah, so then it does feel like you have to hustle. But you're right in that sense of, like, I created my own path in this. I've just realized it recently. I was just on another podcast and I was telling them, I was starting to realize my friends weren't inviting me to do anything. And I was like, what is happening? Like, do they not like me anymore? No,
Right.
I had acted so busy that they didn't want to bother me, because I was doing exactly what you said. I
Ah,
was telling them, oh, I'm so busy and I've got this going on and this going on and this going on and this going on. And so they were like, oh, Ari's too busy to hang out. Well, yeah, I'm busy, but I want to hang out with my friends. So I've had to shift my entire energy just recently on that energy I'm putting out of, I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy, to, yeah, I've got a lot going on, but I'm feeling really good and it's super
I
fun.
like
And what do
that.
you do? Yeah. And that's been so much better for me, but it's still a work in progress. And I'm still having to like retrain everyone in my life that I want to spend time with them.
Right. Okay, so let's go into, like, shift into the clients that you read for.
Okay.
Um, do you know what your accuracy rate is?
Mm. No idea. I have no idea. And it's funny because I just recently heard of a mentor here in my area who she will tell her students that they can't call themselves psychic unless they have like this certain rate of success, a certain ability to say they've been successful. And I have no idea, because I have a lot of people who will reach out to me and they'll say, oh my gosh, your reading was spot on, right? Oh my gosh, this just happened to me. You said this was going to happen and it did. And so you hear those, but I don't know how many people I've read for who walk away and are like, no, that's not accurate, right? Or, oh, I didn't feel that. And then on the other side of that, you have people who are unwilling to face certain things in themselves. And
Yeah.
so I mean, you'll get readings periodically where they're like, that doesn't resonate for me at all. I don't understand. And I'll keep checking in to make sure that I'm getting the right message and that I'm not getting in my own way or my ego's not kicking up. But sometimes people aren't ready to hear it. So sometimes, like, I'll have readings
Right.
I did years ago and they'll say nothing resonated. And then they'll go through some sort of spiritual transition themselves. And they'll come back years later and say, I understand what you were saying now. I get it. And I just wasn't ready to hear it. And I don't think that's true. I think they were ready to hear it and they needed to hear it in that time, because otherwise I
Right.
wouldn't have gotten that message for them, because their guides aren't just throwing messages around willy-nilly. They're figuring out ways to help these people get to where they need to be. And so I find it difficult to even imagine saying I'm 100% accurate, or I'm 90% accurate, or I'm 80% accurate, because
Right.
there's so many moving parts to it, and we all have free will. And that's something that I really stress in my
Yeah.
writing. I can tell you exactly what I see coming up, or what the message is. But if you turn around and decide you're going to go haywire and do something completely different, it will change your whole trajectory. So it's one of the reasons why I don't focus on the future too much in my readings. We really focus on where are you right now, and how can we adapt what's going on, or what steps can you take to get where you want to go, versus down the road, I see this and this and this, because it might shift, it might change. Now,
So,
yeah,
okay.
go
So do you believe in, because a lot of people say stuff like this,
ahead.
when we come here,
Hmm. We have a
our
plan.
lives and our future are already dictated.
Yep,
And that's that everything happens for a reason.
totally.
Everything, you can't F up something that's meant for you. The script is written, the lessons you wanted to learn, you decided before you came down here. So, as
Yep.
much as they say yes, and God gave us free will,
Uh-huh.
we don't have as much control
Yeah.
as we think.
So let
Correct?
me tell you what I believe right now. And I'm saying that because I always am going to reserve the right to change my opinion on this, because I learn something new every second of every day, right? I'll learn new things in this podcast. I learn certainly in the community. I run a spiritual community, and I learn new things constantly in there. So my belief system, and what it's been for a while, is that yes, before I came to Earth this time around, I sat down and I made a plan, right? There was a whole bunch of involvement. It was like, what do we need to learn here? What needs to happen? What, what's the path, right? However, do you remember those choose your own adventure books from when we were kids? And the book was like, you'd go in and you'd read it, and then you'd get to the end of a chapter, and it would say, if you want to do this, go here. And if you want to do this, go here. And it'd be different pages on the book. So each time you read the book, if you make a different choice when it gets to that, you'd go to a different page and the story would change. That's how I kind of look at my life. I think there's an overall plan to what I'm doing, and I feel like I'm finally doing it. But I also feel like there have been moments in my life where it's like, okay, do you want to go this way, or do you want to go this way? And either way is still going to take me on the overall picture, but it still gives me a chance to create my own adventure, to create the life that I want to have. And so it's a big, in my head, when I think about it, it's like this big chart where I'm at the top, and then it just keeps going in all these directions, but at the end it comes back together, right? So all of these directions, all these choices, all these things are still going to come to the end of that major choice that I'm going to make here in my life, of what I'm doing, how I'm helping people, all the things that I'm learning. But the little, like, moments of life, I think those are mine. I think I get to choose those. I get to
Yeah.
celebrate with that. Am I going to be with this person? Am I going to be with this person? And that changes the trajectory of our life. But I also think that there are all of these fail safes on our path, where our guides, our angels, the whole team is like, whoop, come back over here, sister. Like, you're going too crazy. You're going too crazy. Come back over here. And I feel like when I think back on some of those, they've been the darkest moments of my life, right? They've been the hardest things in my life. And then when that happens, it's like a reset button. It's like, okay, we've got to get our act together. What are we going to do? How are we going to feel better in our own skin? And to me, that's coming back to the main path. I can feel
Yeah.
better to that.
Maybe
So
like,
that's my theory.
yeah. And it's kind of like if you're on the wrong path, like you'll feel a lot of resistance in what you're doing versus flow, maybe. Is that like a,
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know if there is a wrong path. I think that there's lots of different directions we can go. And I think that they're all things that give us these, like, think about the hardest things in your life and the lessons you've learned in them, right? Like, I am a spiritual person because I lost someone so close to me to their battle with mental health. And I had to figure out how to deal with that grief. I had to figure out who I wanted to be in the world without that person. And so what that gave me in this horrible darkness and this grief and all of that was the ability to look up and see the breadcrumbs being led. Like it was like, okay, you're sad. How are you going to deal with this grief? And for me, the first thing I dealt with my grief was essential oils. So I started down that path and I started using essential oils to help it. And believe me, you guys, if you're dealing with grief, please see a therapist, see all of that. I'm a big fan. But
Yeah.
the essential oils changed my life and it changed my point of view because I was like, if this little bottle can do that, what else can it do? And then I started learning about chakras. And then I started learning about tarot cards and oracle cards. And then I started going to metaphysical fairs. And then I started having readings. And then those readings started saying, you're supposed to do this. And I was like, oh my God, but I can walk from that darkest moment in my life right to where I'm sitting right now. And I wouldn't trade a second of it. I wish that person was still with me here in our bodies. But let me tell you, he's right there with me on this. He is right there with me.
Wow.
And I'm so grateful that the gift that he gave me was allowing me to reset my entire life, allowing me to figure out that the path that I was currently on, while it was beautiful in its own right, it needed to shift a little bit. I needed to take the right turn instead of the left
Yeah.
turn. And I'm so grateful for that. But it's not great in the moment, right? Like
No.
it's a horrible thing when you're in that darkness, when you're in, they sometimes people call it the dark night of the soul. Or and there's a million different things that a million different people will call it, but I call it the muck. When we're down in the muck, when we can't get out of it because it just sometimes even feels comfortable, right? Like it's like a blanket of yucky. Like sometimes we're down there and sometimes we need to sit there for a while, but eventually something is going to call you out of that muck. And for me, the spiritual path has allowed me to sit in the muck when it happens, and it does. And for me, it's an instant like, oh, gonna go take a nap. I'm gonna go to bed. Everything's done. I'm going back to bed. But it's gone from weeks, if not months, of being in that muck to days to now, most of the time, hours and minutes. And I'm so grateful for that. And it's one of the reasons why I love to share and tap into it, because all of it was following my guides,
Yeah.
following that. And when it feels hard, stopping and going, okay, I've got to have more joy in my life. I've got to have more fun in my life. What can I do to follow that? And when I do that, it tends to start working out faster and better. And I just got to keep going. Like we just got to
Okay.
keep going.
I love that. So let's go into some fun stuff that really like grabs that the viewers probably are like, well, I want her to ask about this.
Huh?
I'm currently in New York City.
Okay.
I love it. I love to take breaks, but I love it.
Okay.
Everybody bitches about one thing here. Well, besides the inflation and the prices,
Right.
the dating scene.
All right.
Why do we, if we are made of love and we're supposed to love, why is finding that person one of the most difficult things for the majority of humans out there?
I wish I had the answer to that. I sometimes I think it's all just a big game. Sometimes I wonder if that's not part of it is, there's a belief that we feel time in such a different way than they do on the other side. And
Yeah.
so when we make these plans, when we say, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to experience this, like I joke all the time. In the first funny video I did, I'm holding my soul contract in between lives. And I say in it, you have me marrying a Scorpio and that's not fair. And there is so much truth in that, right? Because I love my husband dearly, but he's a Scorpio. He's got totally different way of thinking about things than I do. And I sometimes sit when we're having challenges or when we're in those problem moments and I think, is this it? Like, really? This is what I signed up for. Like, this is it. And I'm sure he has that feeling too, because goodness knows, like I have my own things. But part of it to me and what I believe is part of it is that I believe, have soul families. I'm not necessarily like the idea of a soulmate, maybe the idea of twin flames, I really struggle with.
Yeah.
And y'all, it's not that I don't believe it's possible, and it's not believe that it's not there. It's that it's been glorified and been changed so much about what
Yeah.
people think they are. But I do believe that there are people who I've done this with multiple times in my life, right? And I do believe that
Yes.
there's been different emotions with that, different feelings. It could be that one time we're married, one time I'm their mom, one
Oh,
time,
jeez.
any of those things, which is where all that weird stuff comes in. But I genuinely think it's just the adventure of it all. I genuinely think that it's partially, and I'm going to say this, and again, I reserve the right to change my mind, but it's partially for us to figure out what we want and really kind of to demand it. And not to say we need to demand it within the relationship, but to say, I'm not going to settle for anything that is
Amen.
not what I want, right? That is not going to fill me up and raise me to the top. Now, if you've already settled for that, right? You're like almost everybody else, right? In my marriage, we go to couples counseling. We are dealing with the issues, but that's the gift that we've been given is I have someone who I can go to couples counseling with that we can try to work
Yes. That you
at it
want to work at your team.
totally because we love each other, right? Now, does that mean someday we won't decide not to be together? I have no idea. I have no idea. And I'm a psychic, y'all. So like there are these beautiful things that we get to experience in our life. And sometimes the chaos and the drama and the silliness and the ridiculousness of especially love, I think it's something that we do sign up for. I think we come in going, let's just play this game. Let's get down and dirty and figure it out. And it's so hard to say that because believe me, I sit here at my desk sometimes and I think there's no way I signed up for this. There is no
I
way
know. I
that
say
I
that
signed
every
up,
day. No, I'm
right?
just kidding.
But because what the theory is that this is a blink of an eye, right? Like
Really,
it's
yeah.
80 years, 100 years for us, but when we jump back into whatever's in the in between, it's like childbirth, right? Everyone says with childbirth, you forget how horrible it is, so you do it again. I think that's what it might be like in our lifetimes. Like we forget the horrible because we get to look back on it when we go in between and be like, oh, look at that magical moment and look at that cool thing. And oh my gosh, did you imagine I experienced
Ah,
that? So I think to me, again, when I say it's a big game, I think it kind of is. I think there's this like, we're going to go and play all these different parts and experience all these different things and experience the heartache. And when you think about it, there's some beauty in heartache, right?
oh, it's a
some,
lot of growth for sure. And then
yeah.
like
And
I feel like you really need to get your heart broken to learn what you want, what you need. I mean, I know with me, sometimes I wonder like, why is it taking me so long to meet my person? And then I can look back and say like, well, I wasn't ready. I was not ready. I wasn't clear on what I wanted. I didn't love myself enough. But now I
totally,
feel like I am. So how do I like tell my angels like get to work? You can tap into them. See what
you
they say.
just did. You just did. But here's again, you say get to work. And then the second something pretty walks by, you're like, hold on, you guys stay over there. I'm going to go figure this out on my own.
But what if that's the person that they told me to walk past?
And it well could be. However, you're going to know that pretty quick. And here's the thing, we
Oh, I need
find,
help with this. I'm confused. Okay,
well,
let's.
but we find over and over again in our lives. It's one of the reasons why age is such a blessing, right? Because
Yes.
think about who you were at 20,
Oh, well, I
right?
liked myself, but I wouldn't go back there.
But right. But your taste in people, your taste in everything has changed drastically, right? Like I always say every 5 years I'm a whole different human. Like I think different things, I have different beliefs. It's one of the reasons I say so much. I give myself permission to change my mind because I'm going to. I'm going to change my mind drastically. But in this situation here, like let's say for whatever reason my husband and I didn't work out. I'm going to have a totally different way of looking at relationships moving forward. Right now, that's real easy for me to say because I'm sitting in my pretty house with my lovely husband, and we've got like all of these things. Like, believe me, I am aware of my privilege and I am so grateful for it. Doesn't mean we don't have our shit. Oh, I don't know if I could say that. Our stuff. Sorry.
Yes, you can. I wrote a book
Okay.
called Time to Lighten the Fuck Up. You're good to go.
Well, that's kind of what I thought, but I just want to make sure. So, and I think that as we get older, as we do that, we're starting to explore that. So if the person of your life hasn't come in, right? If they're not there and you're like, I am absolutely 100% ready.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm ready today.
I I hear you, but I would say if it's not happening, stop and go, what's the holdup? What is happening here? What is it that like I haven't figured out yet, right? What is it that's that? Now, is it that you're being too picky, which is a possibility, right? Is it that you have such a narrow view of what love is that you can't open it up to anything else? That's a possibility as well. I always say like if you're standing in an alleyway and you're looking at the ocean, you're only seeing a few feet of the ocean.
Right.
You cannot see the vastness of it. So if you can get yourself to widen the scope of what love looks like, that might help to draw that in. The other thing is that how often do you change what you think you want?
I mean, recently, like before I felt like I was confused. I thought I had one thing, and now I'm like, okay, this is what I need. This is if I don't have this, I'm gonna feel more anxious. I'm gonna not be like those. I know what like my needs are, but
Uh-huh.
this is very recent. Like I
Okay.
feel like I just kind of came into this epiphany where, and I know when to walk away quicker. I used to kind of stay and maybe subconsciously be like, oh, I can work this out. I can fight for it. I can convince them to, and then I would suffer on the inside. Now I'm like, not the right timing. I'm getting out of this immediately. And if it's meant to be, it's coming back around because you cannot miss something that is meant for you. And I believe
So
that.
beautiful. But here's the thing. If you are saying like this is what I want, and that's not exactly what's going to be the best for you, there's mixed messages going out. So it could be that you're saying, absolutely, I
Ah.
know what I want, but your team is like, sister, you're missing something. You're missing something. And we don't want to give you what you don't want because we do want you to be happy and we do want to do that. So here's what you got to add. You ready? This is for manifestation as a whole.
I'm writing it
I
down.
give credit to my friend Kendara, who taught me this saying, and a lot of people say it, but when you are manifesting anything, this or something better.
Yes.
Okay. Because that's part of the problem that we find so much in our life. If I would have gotten everything I've tried to manifest in my life, I would not be a happy person because there were so many times in my life that I thought if I could only have the house, the money, the job, the everything, but
Oh,
then I wouldn't
yeah.
be sitting here with you. Right. So that
Right.
wasn't meant to be. There wasn't this thing. So if I say this or something better, and then I have faith that it's coming,
I like
then you've got
that.
to trust the process. You've got to trust the process because it's there. Now, by doing that and saying this or something better, you're also drawing in whatever it is that's going to be best for you. But the other thing, and this is my friend Travis Holp, who, if you're following him on Instagram, you know how amazing he is.
I
But
did.
Travis Holp,
Yes.
the medium, he's phenomenal. But he's also the one that brought back to me that he was starting to manifest in emotions instead of in actual material things. So instead of thinking about what
Whoa.
this guy to look like, what you want him to be, what you want, their job to be, all of these things, it's how do I want to feel when I'm with this person? And
That's
that
wow.
but
Ladies, men, listen up.
totally, because if you think about it, what you want more than anything is to feel safe and you want to
Love,
feel
safe.
supported
Yeah.
and you want to feel excited and happy and you want to feel comfortable. And so if you start looking at it in those feelings, then it widens that scope even more because they're going to start pushing people towards you who help you feel that way. Not that any relationship is going to be 100% like that, right? We have those down times. But really what we all want is to feel safe and secure and free and loved. And so if you can find somebody who fulfills those needs, then that's going to be the person who you're going to connect with more than I want them to be 6'2" with dark
Yeah.
hair and all of that, right? And that's not to say that you can't have a type. Of course you can. Looks are important to a lot of people. There's a lot of things like that, but add that into how you want to feel. right? How
I
does
like
that
that.
feel? Right. I want to feel proud when I'm walking down the street with them. I want to feel comfortable that they're going to be able to handle any social situation.
Yes.
So by bringing
Right.
that emotion into it, see what happens, because you might open it up to a whole new world, and then it might surprise you what happens there.
Okay, so do you believe that if something is meant for you, it can't pass you by and we should let go of the stress that we try to control? Because we try to control so much in our lives. Like, I can't let this go. I can't fuck up this job. I can't fuck up this relationship. I can't fuck up. But it's like, let it go. If it's meant for you, it cannot pass you by. Correct?
So I feel as though we are at our best when we're in the flow of the universe, which means that if I'm in a job and the flow of the universe is saying, this is not your job, that job is going to mess it up, right? It's going to happen no matter what, right? If I'm not supposed to be in a certain thing, a perfect example of this is when I was working both my muggle job and trying to run my community and do psychic work and do all of that. I was exhausted. There was so much, but I could not take that leap to leave the security of that other
Right.
job. I was so scared, right? And anybody who's ever taken a leap of faith, whether it's into comedy or into metaphysics or into anything, knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Well, the universe decided for me. I did a spiritual practice, and in that spiritual practice, I let go of all of this weight, of all of this expectation, of all of these things that I needed to do. And I'm not kidding, within the next week, every client I had called me and said, we're going to be done at the end of the year. And I was like, and this was in November. And I thought I had months and months and months of these contracts left. But it was like the universe was like, okay, good. She's ready now. Ended it. All of it was done. And I went, okay, like, obviously, this is it, right? Obviously, like, there's nothing I can hide about. Everything just
Wow.
turned. And so then here's my choice. In that moment, when I'm sitting there in that like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I need to get paid. I need to do that. I had to sit and get really quiet, and I had to go, what's next? And then I had to wait. And that was hard because I am a doer. I am a doer.
Yes,
I'm
that's
going
how
to
I
get
am.
things done. And I didn't wait forever. I didn't just sit there and wait for things to happen, which is a huge problem with manifestation and law of attraction, right? Like you do have to take those action steps. But then it was like, okay, this low-hanging fruit happened. So the next thing I know, I've got a client reaching out and saying, hey, could I book an event with you? Absolutely, you can. So I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to stop and go, how can I turn this into the next thing? Right? Hey, guides, help me. Something pops up on Instagram. Okay, it's time for me to look at Instagram. Okay, it's time for me to do this. And so following those breadcrumbs where they're laying in front of you to guide you to where you need to be. And we do this somewhat naturally, but we also then all of a sudden think, okay, it can't be this easy. So I got to make it more complicated, right? Like it has to be harder than this. Or we panic because we don't trust that the universe will provide for us. And
Yeah.
if you're sitting there and you're going, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do. This isn't going to happen. Sometimes you got to put your spirituality to the side and you just got to go get the part-time job, right? You got to do what you got to do to eat. Like sometimes because you can't think
I know.
straight to do
When
anything
you're in
else.
the, exactly.
And so if that's what you have to do to get yourself into a place that you can then open back up to letting the universe do it, then please do that. Like I say that all the
Yeah,
time
I agree with that. Yeah. I like
because
that.
sometimes you just got to get the part-time job. Sometimes you got to go drive for DoorDash. Sometimes you got to do these things. And in that can be its own teaching, its own learning. And sometimes it's because you're going to get back into it and go, what the hell is wrong with me? If I would have spent the exact same amount of time creating the life that I wanted instead of being afraid that it wasn't going to come to me, I'd be fine now. But we are in such fear in our society. And I'm right there with everybody. So please don't think that I've got it all figured out.
Yeah.
To consistently stop and go, what are you afraid of? Okay, I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to eat. Okay, well, if I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to eat because I don't have money, what are some steps that I can take to make some money? All right.
Yep.
Well, when's the last time you threw out on Instagram that you do readings? Never. I never talk about my readings on Instagram. And that's not true, but I rarely do. So then it's like, okay, I'll sit quietly or I'll go into meditation and I'll let them give me the picture of what's next.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I'll let them be like, offer a discount. Okay, I'm going to do that. Or I'll let them be like, go to this networking event. So it is taking inspired action, but it has to be inspired. Because
Yeah.
if you're just taking action,
Yes, it's exactly. No, it's so true. Okay, well, so let's where can people find you? Because I had a reading with you before you came on the podcast and you were great and I was just blown away by how you were able to like tap into the guides and you were kind of looking up and you're like, okay, okay, okay. And you had good advice. Like for me, it was like what to be aware of as things unfold in a positive way for me, but
yeah.
it can come with more notoriety, can come a lot of pressure. So it was a lot of like kind of, kind of a roadmap to protect yourself and and it was great. So if you guys are looking for guidance and you just feel stuck or lost, like Ari's great. I vouch for her. If she sucked, she wouldn't have been on the podcast, but she didn't. So she's on it. So she was actually good. I vetted her before I brought her on. So
That's
look her
important.
up. So plug your stuff so people can find you because you were fantastic.
Thank you so much. Yeah, honestly, the easiest way is probably on Instagram. So Ari Hunniford, AriHunniford. I'm sure it'll be in all the notes. If you go to @Ari Hunniford, you can find me on Instagram. One, hopefully you'll like my silly videos. But then if you go on, I'm linked there on my snip feed, which is how you book with me. You can also find me in the community that I run. It's called Awkwardly Zen. And so you can go to awkwardlyzen.com and we do 30 free metaphysical events every single month, all online. We're all over the world. We've got over 16,000 members. And so it's just a really cool way to explore your spirituality in a safe place.
I love
There's
that.
no right or wrong. And yeah, it's been such an amazing journey to be able to connect with people. So if the weird stuff is happening, because spirituality is so weird, come hang out with us and you won't feel as weird because there's a lot of us going through it.
Okay, well, perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your gift. It really is a gift.
Well,
So
thank you
you,
for having me.
of course, yeah. So you guys really, I hope that you found this episode inspiring, but also helpful. That your guides are there to actually help you. Your guardian angels are there to help you. And we learned what was so important for me that I learned, and I hope everybody loved this too, was the how to ask them and how to sit back and wait and how to
Yeah.
not step over them. So that was great. So thank you. And thank you to everybody who's listening, wherever you may be. We'll see you next time to find out who is next.
Hey, your host here, Madison Malloy. Please make sure to subscribe to the show on all podcast platforms and please rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify. Also, if you have any questions or comments, you can email us at contact@nexttomadison.com. I thank you again for listening. Bye.